Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to A Rebel's Compass. I am very, very excited to have Eve Thomas join me this afternoon to share her journey and to talk a little bit about about a book that she wrote. I'm very excited for Eve to be here. And first of all, I want to congratulate her for facing her fear and being seen on video and posting this out on social media and wherever this video ends up. It takes a huge amount of courage, Eve, to step into a fear and step through it. So thank you so much for coming and joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me, Karen, because it's been a long journey of mine, and I was afraid to even say anything about who I am or past lives information or anything like that. So yeah.
It is, and you know, it's so I know, having faced my own fears and stepped through some of my own, and I'm sure there's a whole heck of a lot more that I've still got to do, but the ones that I've done, it's very liberating after you've done it, because you've got that sense of, wow, I did that. So
Right.
yeah.
Yes.
So I'm very excited for you to be here, Eve. Now, I'm going to give you the platform and tell us where your story started and share what you're comfortable with sharing, and just guide us to what brought you perhaps to write this book.
Okay. I was raised in a small community of Bowness in Alberta, Canada. My grandfather bought property in that town, and there was a 2-room house on there with a pump and a shed and an outhouse. And I wasn't born yet, but my 2 older sisters were, so they lived there with my parents, and my dad was building our home that I moved into next door.
Right.
So it was fun. We played, we swam and hiked and all kinds of things. But I started going to church or Sunday school at the age of 3 with my 2 older sisters. And about when I got a little older, I started seeing white light around everyone. So I didn't know what that was. And I asked one of my sisters, I said, do you see the white light around people? And she didn't know what I was talking about. So I never mentioned it again. Years later, I realized it was their auras or their energy fields, right? So about age 11, I had a vision of myself as an older woman, fully dressed, swimming in deep water, holding a child. And it scared me to death because I thought it was a future event. And I thought, wow, this isn't a good thing if I have children. So that was one of the reasons I never did have any family of my own, because it was always in the back of my mind thinking there would be a flood or something and I would be, dire straits with my children. And I was always afraid of deep water, and I didn't understand why, because I hadn't had any experience with water. We had a local swimming hole, but it was shallow. About the age of 16, I was still continuing going to church, and nobody mentioned reincarnation or past lives. And that's when I started thinking I had been on the earth before. And I didn't understand why or where I even got that thought, because nobody had mentioned it. So I was still going to church, and then about I was working at an oil company, and I met a fellow there, and we ended up getting married. And he was Catholic and I was Protestant, and the church I was going to was Protestant, of course. And then he, got in the way of that, and people were in the church saying, get back to the will of God. And I thought, how do you know what the will of God is for me? So we ended up marrying, and we were married for 22 years. And during that time, I kept seeing the numbers 2211 or 1122, and sometimes the number 8 would show up. So the first time I saw it was on a house in the rich part of Calgary, an older home, and it was 2211 7th Street. And it was originally owned by a couple who had gone on the Titanic. Well, they'd gone to Europe on their honeymoon and come back on the Titanic, and they both survived.
Oh.
Well, him being her husband, there was speculation that he had worn his wife's clothing, or there were rumors all over why had he survived, and it was supposed to be women and children only. So he was ostracized, and they didn't have a happy life. And I got to go in that home twice in the 1980s because my husband worked with a woman who was renting that home from the third owner. So we would go there and have party and stuff like that. And twice I was in that home, and it was very strange. I felt very funny being in there because I thought, well, had I been on the Titanic?
Yeah.
So then years go by, and I divorced from my husband. Well, at age 42, I went back to school, and that's when we separated. And it was just, a hard time for me because I felt I couldn't support myself or him if I didn't have more education.
Mm-hmm.
So then, 1993, going back to school, and it was tough, but I did it, graduated, and then got a job back in as a technical writer in Calgary, and started a whole new life without my husband. And things started to progress from there. But again, we divorced in 1999. And when I received my divorce papers, they were stamped November 11th or November 22nd. So 11/22/1999.
Wow.
So those numbers kept following. And then I had a reading on November 1st. And the lady said to me that the 22 was my soul activation number, and the 11 was my human number. So it was meant to be, to come with me. Anyway, so then I'm losing my train of thought.
Nope, that's fine.
Um,
So while you're carrying on, can I just ask you a question? So
yes.
when you, at that time in your life, when you got divorced and you was going back to school, do you remember what came up for you? I know you mentioned that there was fear came up for you of how, supporting yourself or moving forwards. Was it your own personal faith that kind of made you keep going forward, or was there something else that came up for you and around you that supported you in breaking an old pattern and transitioning from a relationship into now being somebody who's living alone?
My husband wasn't well. He had some health issues, and I was always afraid that I was going to be the breadwinner. And so that spurred me on to get a full-time job because he was working contract. So I needed more education and a diploma to prove that I could do a job, even though I had been working all my life, right? So that was part of it. But when I was in school, I lost weight because I had gained weight and I wasn't fit. So I started exercising 5 days a week and swimming once a week, let my hair grow. And then I started wearing blue jeans and a jean jacket, and I would always turn the collar up. And I didn't understand why that. I didn't connect that to anything. And then one of the fellows looked at me and he said, "You've got an Elvis thing going on." I said, "Oh," because I knew nothing about Elvis. So, when he said that, I thought, okay, I kind of laughed it off, right? So this was 1993 when he said that. So that was the first time I thought maybe that was a past life or something with Elvis. I didn't know. So then when I graduated, I came back to Calgary. I bought a home and was working, and everything was going good. And I started I decided I needed to move forward with my spirituality, because when I was with my husband, I let all of that go. I didn't go to church. I didn't do any spiritual reading or meditating, nothing. So then when I thought, well, gee, maybe I should get into some sort of modality or something for healing. So I thought Reiki might be the way to go, because I'd heard about that, and nobody I knew did any healing work. So I phoned a lady I found on the telephone, and she said she wasn't teaching Reiki anymore, but would I be interested in angelic healing? So I said, okay. So the first class was in April of 2006. So I went to first class, and there were 4 of us, and then the instructor. And so I wasn't sure what to expect, but we did psychometry. Is it psychometry? Yes.
Psychometry, yes, where you hold a piece of jewelry and you get the energy from
and
it.
get a message from somebody's. Yeah. So we did that, and then in the afternoon, I think we did card readings in the morning too. But then the rest of the class, without the instructor, went for lunch, and I hadn't said anything about Elvis or anything. And so then when I can we stop? Absolutely. I think I'm confused.
No, that's fine, Eve. I just want to ask you a question actually while we're going, and that's fine, because when you're telling a story, it kind of interlinks. Your brain's already steps ahead, and you're trying to catch up. But I do want to ask you a question. So I know there's so many people out there that can identify with the fact that when they get married or something like that, they kind of lose themselves in a relationship. You become, a couple, and anything that you were drawn to when you were younger, you kind of let go of, and it's always in the back of your mind that eventually you're going to get back into it, but then life takes over and you never do.
Right.
And there's so many people that I speak to that I hear them say, oh, I love to do card readings, but I'll get back to it one day, or I really want to try a new modality, but I never have the time. And very often life can come around like it did for you, and it did for me also, where you just kind of picked up, put on a different pathway, and
yes,
all of a sudden now you've got the opportunity, and do you take the opportunity? So when you were doing the angel healing, what was the biggest part that you enjoyed out of that? Do you remember?
Oh yeah, it was Elvis.
Okay, so this is the next question. So I know a little bit about your story, which we're going to get into, but when was the very first time, other than the gentleman where you pulled your collar up and said, oh, you've got an Elvis vibe going on, when was the very, very first time that you actually connected with the energy and the essence of Elvis?
Right.
Was it at that time when you were doing? No, tell me about that.
I missed that because I jumped right to the angelic card readings, and I missed the whole thing.
Okay, so let's go back and do that.
Yeah. So I started meditating in about 2005, and I connected to Jesus.
Okay.
And he seemed very familiar to me, like we were close or something, and I'd see us walking on a beach, or just being companions. And I didn't understand that because coming from church, he's an uppity up.
Yeah, and we're just lower humans.
Could I be so familiar with somebody, the man of God, the son of God kind of thing, right? So anyway, then in 2006, June the 5th, 2006, Elvis Presley came into my meditation wearing his black leathers and singing All Shook Up.
Oh, cool.
And I was not a fan. My mom, I own none of his music. I had not seen any of his movies because my mom wouldn't let us. Right. So I thought, what the heck is this, right? first it was Jesus, and now I've got Elvis.
Wow.
So he's, he told me I would have other famous people appear in my meditation. And I thought, well, I don't know if I want that, because every year we'd watch the movie Scrooge. And was I living that with the ghost of past, present, future? I didn't know if I wanted more dead people coming. So then on June the 11th, I had no less than 10 people show up. The first person I saw was Sonny Bono, and I heard the song Baby Please Don't Go, which was recorded in 1964 and was a hit, a #1 hit with Sonny and Cher. Then I saw Frank Sinatra, Dean Martin, Sammy Davis Jr., Peter Lawford, Bing Crosby, Rosemary Clooney, Jacqueline Onassis Kennedy, John Jr., and the man whose face I only saw out in front of all of these people, like they were standing like they were waiting for a photo. But the person out in front was this person, and his name was Frank. And I remember seeing him on Ed Sullivan, but I didn't remember his last name.
Mm-hmm.
So I said, okay, if this is real. Oh, and Jackie was holding a picture of JFK and said he had reincarnated.
Okay.
So then I said, if this is real, I want a sign. So I ended the meditation. I went downstairs. I turned on the television, and it was an old movie being played, and Connie Francis was in it, and it's Where the Boys Are. And no sooner sat down and watch it, in walks Frank in the next scene. Wow. So then I looked at the credits and the cast and found he was Frank Gorshin. And he was someone I never cared for, because he was an impersonator, and or impressionist, and he would screw up his face and make contortions. And I didn't like the man at all. And I thought, I'm sorry, why are you here? So then when I looked at his credits, he played in a movie called All Shook Up, which linked me back to Elvis.
Yes. Wow. Can I ask you, Eve, do you now know what the connection is with all the people, all the music and all of that? Because that is phenomenal. And I'm going to share a little bit here for myself. When you said, about Jesus connecting with you. When I was young, I lived in the UK. And when I was young, I shared a bedroom with my nana, which was my dad's mum. And every night I would go to bed, and they had a drop down ceiling. And every night I would go to bed, and I would see this huge long table. And there were 2 men sat at either end. There was 1 man sat in the middle, and the only one that ever communicated with me was this man that would then whisper in each other's ear, and then he would literally talk to me. And it wasn't until many, many, many years later that my brain actually clicked in and went, because I saw a picture, the Last Supper, and it was like, that's who I spoke to. And it was well into my 50s before I ever shared anything with anybody, because like you said, who am I?
Yeah.
Why me? Why would somebody, and for anybody for me to say to anybody that Jesus used to visit me in my ceiling, they'd think I was a complete fruitcake.
I totally get.
Yeah. And when I was young and I used to tell my parents all of this, they used to say to me, oh, Karen, you've got such a vivid imagination.
Yeah.
So you just dismiss it.
I know. I never told anybody that I connected to Jesus. No way.
Yeah.
Then when Elvis showed up, I didn't tell anybody that either. I thought, I can't be, this is too wild. But anyway, so the 11th, Sammy Davis, was it the 11th? No, this was the 11th that all these people showed up. And then on the 12th, Sammy Davis Jr. showed up in a armchair, wearing a 3-piece suit, having a watch fob in his pockets. and was sitting. It was to remind me about Lincoln sitting in the chair and that, you know, and so I felt that he was a black, the JFK had reincarnated as a black man.
Okay.
So I started looking at people because Rosemary Clooney had also said that George needs you. And I thought, oh yeah, right. I must be hallucinating, right? Anyway, I started looking at people who were in close to George Clooney, black men, and was born in 1964 because 1964 they had given me, and I thought, well, let me see who that is. So I started researching, and you know, I'm not going to tell the ending because it's in the book, the riddle. I discovered the riddle, and it was to discover who JFK is now.
Oh, cool.
So that was, it was a huge riddle, and it took me a couple of years to figure that out. But so this was 2006 when all of this happened. And then I still wasn't sure why Elvis had appeared to me. But then in 2007, like he would still, when Jesus didn't appear, Elvis would. So back and forth. And I thought, what is this? So then in 2007, I was guided to look at, guided to Larry Geller. And I don't know if you've heard of him, but he was Elvis's hairstylist and spiritual mentor. Okay. And Larry had just written a book about Elvis, and it was called The Leaves of Elvis's Garden, The Song of His Soul. Okay. And Elvis guided me to get that book, and which I did because I still didn't know much about Elvis. And I did discover that he'd had an identical twin brother who was stillborn. Okay, yeah. So Elvis told me I was his twin flame. Okay. So I thought, was I his twin that died? I didn't know. Mm-hmm. So then when I got the book and read Larry's book, and Larry had promised Elvis to write his spiritual story and their lifetime together. So I was, happy to get it. And it was an autographed copy from Larry. So I was quite pleased with that. And then I thought, well, both Jesus and Elvis were healers because Elvis actually used blue light to heal people. And when he was born, and I was apparently stillborn, the house was illuminated in blue light. And he always sang about blue. Yes, he did. Everything was blue. Yeah. And I myself, in my work and everything, I always would use Blue Moon as a password or anything with blue in it. Right. So I thought, why am I fixated on blue? And then I see he was too, right? Mm-hmm. So then I took the angelic healing course in April of 2008. And we went to lunch after the morning session, and we went to lunch, and it's no sooner sitting down in the restaurant, and I hadn't told them about Elvis. He told me not to say anything for 2 years, and I thought, okay, yay. Thank you, don't want to do that. Yeah. No sooner sit down in the restaurant, and these other women look at me and they said, Eve, are you okay? Do you need to go to emergency? And I said, why? They said, you're blue. I said, you got to be kidding. And they said, no. Are you okay? I said, and I knew it was Elvis. I knew he had done this. And I didn't even think to look at my hands because I was in shock. Yeah. I thought, what the heck is this, buddy? Yeah. So then by the end of I poo-pooed it, and I said, oh, it's just a message for me. Right. So by the end of the meal, one lady looked at me and she said, are you going to tell us what this is about? And so I said, well, am I still blue? Still not looking at my body, right? Mm. She said, only your nose. I thought, great. Neon.
So you had a Smurf look going on.
Like at least it wasn't Rudolph.
Yeah,
But
there you go. It's blue's a good color.
yeah, exactly. So then I said, well, it's Elvis. I said, I'm connected to Elvis. And I said, it's him doing this. So then when we went back to the workshop, I told that instructor and all of them that I was connected to him. So he actually showed me the color blue to use in my healings.
Right.
So I was guided to use that blue in all the modalities or anything that I was using to heal people.
Oh.
So from then on, he called me the blue nose healer.
So
Not the dog,
humor too.
not the dog, because there is an Australian dog called a blue nose.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Do you know one of the things I found, Eve, over my years of me being guided and doing energy work and communicating with spirit, they have a heck of a sense of humor.
Oh, tell me. Yes.
And there's days there's been so many days I've gone, really?
Yeah, really.
They do.
Totally.
They have such an amazing sense of humor because they see the growth step that's going to take place while you're still panicking because something's happened.
Yes.
They find it funny.
I know. And Elvis is a real jokester.
Right.
He always says, expect the unexpected.
Well, I think that's true for everything, really. That's good.
Exactly. So he's taken me places where he has filmed movies. I've traveled, and and where he's done concerts and things. I've been to Baltimore and California where he's recorded, or Seattle where he filmed. It happened at the World's Fair. All of those things. I would not know where he'd been, but all of a sudden somebody would mention Elvis on my trip, and then explained. But yeah. No, he's taken me many places that I wouldn't have traveled.
What an adventure. Other than turning you blue,
Yeah.
is the biggest message you've had from Elvis?
I would say it was confirming who I was and how we are connected.
Okay, fantastic.
Yeah, because we did go to Vegas, and I experienced, my girlfriend and we went on a plane to Vegas, right? And it was probably May of 2012. And as soon as we're chatting and having a good time, right? We're all excited. I'd never been to Vegas, and neither had she, right? And there was a Cirque du Soleil Elvis show there. And I really wanted to go, but my girlfriend wanted to see Phantom of the Opera, so I wasn't pushing it, right?
Right.
So she's sitting there, she's got a little t-shirt on, and we're just chatting and stuff, and I look at her, and all I see is she's got a red bow tie on, a man's red bow tie, and it wouldn't go away. I mean, it wasn't there physically, but in my mind, I could see it. I didn't, because she hadn't experienced Elvis the way I had over the years. She didn't really know anything about him. She knew we were connected, but she didn't experience his miracles.
Yeah.
So it wouldn't go away. And I thought, oh, I have to tell her. So I said, I'm seeing you're wearing a man's red bow tie. It was like from a tuxedo. And she said, oh. And no sooner told her, it was gone.
Okay, yeah.
And I said, it's gone. It's never mind. It's gone, right? So then we get into a hotel. We're all registered, and then we decided to go and line up at the ticket place and get our tickets for Phantom. And we also wanted to go see The Dream and at the Wynn Hotel. And I didn't say any more about Elvis. Here, not knowing, she's arguing with Spirit behind me, because Spirit is telling her, you need to go see Elvis. And she said, no, 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 no. not doing it. I want Phantom.
Yeah.
I didn't know. She didn't tell me this for years later. So we get up to the counter and all of a sudden she said, yeah, we'd like 2 tickets to see Cirque du Soleil Elvis. And I looked at her, I said, are you sure? And she said, yeah. So anyway, we ended up there. We got tickets in the front row, tickets or seats 8 and 9. Elvis's number was an 8. Oh, there's a cat.
That's my daughter-in-law's cat. I'm looking after it. It's hiding under. It's the first time I've seen it since Saturday.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Anyway, so we get tickets and we're sitting in the front row. And it starts, there's a big screen and Elvis is on the screen singing, and then it shows a picture of him with his mom and dad as a young boy. And from the side of the stage, in walks a man and a woman dressed as his parents, holding the hand of a young boy. I totally lost it. I started sobbing and I couldn't control myself. So I ended up in Dawn's lap because I didn't know what the heck was wrong with me. I just sobbed. So I realized it was healing me from the past life I should have had.
Right.
And so then I pulled myself together, and then, it was different songs they sang and dancing and everything. It was just wonderful. And by the end of close to the end of the show, a young couple came on stage. She was wearing a red little dress, and he was wearing black pants, tuxedo pants with a cummerbund, a white shirt, and a red bow tie that was untied. And I looked at Dawn and she had her mouth open and I says, my goodness. And they did this dance routine to Suspicious Minds. And then there was stairs in the center of the stage, and down came more men wearing the same outfit, some wearing black bow ties and some wearing red. And I just was blown away. I thought, you can't make this stuff up.
No, you can't. I've had so many instances like that over my lifetime, where spirit communicated with me, and I've done the same thing. No, can't say that. No, can't say that. No, can't say that. And then when you do, you get the confirmation.
Yeah.
There must be so many people out there.
Yes.
Experience the same thing where they get messages, but they're afraid to say, I've got a message, and I know what that feels like. You know what that feels like.
Yeah.
I mean, even connecting to your intuition, let alone getting messages from spirit. How many times have we had a message from our intuition? Don't do that. Go right, go left, whatever.
Exactly.
And then afterwards you go, I should have done that, or I should have said that.
Yes.
Yeah. That's fantastic.
Yeah, totally. So anyway, we did a few more things and went to that other show, The Dream, and we had a good time, and then came home. And when we came home, I got a message from Elvis that there were, because at the end of the show, he was singing If I Can Dream, wearing his white suit, because it was the 68 comeback, right?
Right.
So he's wearing that and he's got a red tie on. So he said to me, there's more information about that outfit. You need to Google it. So I went and I searched and I found there was an untold story, and it was during the Vietnam War. Vietnam War was from 1954, I believe, to 75.
Mm-hmm.
And there was like 50,000 people that died, men and women, in that war, Americans. So when he was recording that show, Martin Luther King had been shot in April, and Robert Kennedy died, or was shot on June the 5th, but died on June the 6th. And Elvis appeared to me on June the 5th. Anyway, he said, check to see what is more about this suit. So the fellow who designed all his clothes had him wearing the white suit for that last song, but he said, something was missing. And then he had watched Walter Cronkite the night before and discovered all these people had died, and felt that Elvis needed to wear a red tie, a red neckerchief.
Yeah.
So he told Elvis, and they decided this was appropriate, and it was to represent the blood of all of those soldiers that had died.
Wow.
And him and that his clothes designer couldn't talk about it to anybody else. So that was the secret story of that. So yeah, they couldn't talk about it. So that was the meaning. And so he said, write that in your story.
Mm-hmm.
So I shared that chapter, the red bow tie, on the Elvis Information Network as a separate chapter, which I haven't published anywhere else.
Wow. You know, I grew up listening to Elvis. It's all I used to listen to growing up. You know, I loved his music.
Yeah.
I still do. All of that era, the 60s, 70s, 80s music, that's when music was music. I really, really enjoyed that music. And I used to listen to my dad singing Blue Suede Shoes and
Right.
All of those songs in the kitchen while he was washing up.
Sure.
So I appreciate that era and that music. And there's always messages in the music.
Oh, yes. Right.
So when Elvis appeared to you, how did the book come about?
So I had been documenting for years my spiritual journey. So when he appeared, I guess I have to go back to the Titanic, because I took a cruise with my family to Mexican Riviera. And on our way back, I didn't look at the dates when we were traveling, but it was April the 2nd to April the 12th. The Titanic hit the iceberg on April the 14th and sank on the 15th. So when we were on this ship heading back to San Diego, we were going really fast. I think he was trying to make up time, and there were waves and we were hitting them hard. All of a sudden we were in the dining room, and all of a sudden there was a loud bang and the lights went out and everybody gasped. And we thought, oh no, what's going on? And some of the chefs came out of the kitchen, and the captain came on the ship and saying, we're experiencing electrical problems. We can't go as fast as we'd like. And so we limped along for a while, and then he had to shut down the engines. And I thought, this feels like the Titanic.
Yeah.
And all the lights were out, except emergency lights in certain places. But when we were trying to get back to our cabin, then all the lights went out again. So we're on this stairwell, and luckily there was a man with a flashlight, but there was no lights in our cabins. So this was just like, wow, this is deja vu.
Yeah.
So then this was 2007. And so then when I got back home, I had been connecting with, they had to fly a guy out from San Diego to fix the problem. So when I got home, it was actually Friday the 13th, and the Titanic would have sunk on the 14th, or hit the iceberg on the 14th.
Right.
But I thought, this is totally about the Titanic, and were there spirits on the ship? Which I got a confirmation that there were, and this was for me to remember. And so they told me I needed to write my book, and it would be titled Remember. And it was, remember, and it was a love story.
Wow.
So that's where I got the title. And so I continued documenting, because I think I started documenting stuff in 1997 or 98. So I had all of these journals and things that I had been writing my stories in, and so that's how it all culminated, but I didn't publish it until 2014. but I wasn't even sure if I was going to publish it, because I didn't know how to do publishing. So again, I went to a writer's workshop. I went to a spiritual workshop in, where was it? Arizona. Yeah, I think it was Arizona, Phoenix. And I went to a workshop with a publisher there. And so he was telling us all about how to publish your book and giving us hints and everything. So he actually, after a break, he said, I'm looking for somebody who's writing a book on reincarnation. And I thought, oh, come on.
Divine alignment, Steve, divine alignment.
I thought, you got to be kidding. So I stood up and they gave me the microphone and I said, well, I'm writing a book about reincarnation and my connection to Elvis Presley. Well, the publisher, which I've kept quiet because there was a strong connection to him. So I said, well, I'm writing this book, but I need to get it published. And so he's up sitting on his chair and his head is down and he's crying. And I thought, what the heck is the matter? Everybody was looking at me because I'm talking about Elvis. I'm looking at him and he's so emotional. And I thought, what the heck? Who is he?
Yeah.
So anyhow, I went and shook his hand at the end, gave him my business card and whatever. And he came and he said to me, my wife and I went on our honeymoon to Graceland, and she has since passed away.
Mm.
So this was raw. His emotions were very raw. So anyway, he said he was going to have another workshop probably the next year. So I thought, I want to go to that because I need more information. Anyway, so in the meantime, I had a past life regression. And of course, I went into the Titanic lifetime and I saw the publisher was my husband. Mm-hmm. And we actually drowned on the Titanic. We were in steerage in the lower bottom of the ship. Mm. And going back to when I was 11, that's me from the Titanic swimming, holding our daughter, and fully clothed. And now here I was in this regression with him as my husband. And we were coming from England heading to the US. Right. And so that brought me full circle to him and our lifetime and how we died on the Titanic.
Mm-hmm. I've had past life regression done many, many times myself. One of my closest friends does past life regression and life between lives, and I have another friend who does past life journeying. And I can honestly say it's one of the biggest gifts I've ever had, having had past life regression. The things that I've healed within my own being with past life regression is phenomenal.
Yes.
So I can honestly say to anybody out there listening to this, if it's something that calls to you, go and find somebody who's reputable, find somebody who comes by recommendation, but go. I healed. Growing up, I was terrified of fire. I used to have a reoccurring dream, and the reoccurring dream was that a house caught fire and my brother was trapped in the fire and I saw him burn to death. When I had a past life done, it wasn't my brother that was trapped in the fire, it was me.
Oh, wow.
I was 8 years old and I couldn't get out of the house and I burned to death in a fire. But after experiencing that, understanding it, my fear of fire disappeared. Did your fear of water disappear the same way?
No.
No?
I still don't like deep water.
Yeah, I can understand that, deep water, but yeah, for me, I couldn't even sit around the campfire.
Right.
It was so bad. I couldn't. Right. My grandparents had a coal fire, and I couldn't stand in front of the coal fire because I was just so afraid of fire. But past life regression is incredible.
Oh, it's very good, yeah. And
Yeah.
I do love to cruise.
Right,
So drowning on the Titanic did not stop me from cruising, because I've been about 7 times.
right. Well, that clearly it healed that as well. Do you have that? Do you ever have that image come up again of you carrying your daughter?
I actually shared it with the publisher and told him the story, and he totally connected to that, because he always felt he'd had a connection to the Titanic. And when I told him our life, and he agreed, and yeah, so
And
yeah.
the level of people that, you have touched with the story you've written, remember, and your connection with Elvis and everything else is phenomenal. And do you still do healing work now?
Very little. I have a girlfriend who comes over for a healing once in a while, but I had tried to do have an office and make appointments and everything years ago, and that didn't go work. I just couldn't get the clientele. I think part of it was not accepting who I was connected with. People didn't want to come and get healed by Elvis. They didn't know if I was Jesus, or because I figured that they are one and the same.
Mm-hmm.
Is my belief, that that because they were both healers, they both appeared, and I've got a strong connection to both. And I did have a past life regression with Brian Weiss, Dr. Brian Weiss.
Mm-hmm.
And he did 2 regressions. One was to go to a significant event in your life, or a past life, and I ended up at my wedding to Jesus.
Okay.
And I was so shocked, because I wasn't expecting that.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next one was to go to when you're being born.
Right.
And I thought I would go to this lifetime when I was being born with my mom, but it was when I was born deceased.
Right.
And Elvis was born. So I went to that lifetime to see my birth, death, and his birth. So I hovered above that and saw that experience as well.
Yeah. Eve, what is your biggest experience, or the biggest impact all of this has had on your life? Because, very often, I know for me, I spent my whole life at the back of the class, the back of the room, standing in the shadows. I didn't want to be seen. I didn't any of that. So, and clearly Spirit had a different plan for me, because here I am doing this. But it's not something I would have chosen on my own, because
right.
I just kept being pushed, kept being pushed, kept being pushed. So when you look at the way your life has unfolded, and the connections you've had with Spirit, and the levels of healing that you've had and done with others, what is the biggest impact you think that has had on your life?
I guess we're more connected to the other side. The veil is very thin.
Mm-hmm.
And if people were to listen, or were more aware of the signs around them, they would see there is more to our experiences than we realize, and that we've come back multiple times, different sexes, different cultures. But the bottom line is, Elvis always says, focus on peace and love.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the biggest lesson I think I've learned, is to be calm and I try to be a light,
Yeah.
and a calming effect in any experience I'm in,
Mm-hmm.
because I know I'm always connected to the other side.
Right. Right. And if anybody listening to this has connected or is connecting to spirit, and they're feeling afraid to say anything, what advice would you give to them? If you were going to give them
Open your mouth.
and just say it.
Just get out there and open your mouth, because if the opportunity comes to you, do it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not life and death.
Yeah.
I mean, I think I've never had an experience where I was given the opportunity to share my story. Only once, and that was with a group of people who were learning to speak. I went to a speaking group, and everybody got 10 minutes to get up and tell their story. So I did. I shared some of the Titanic story, and after I did that, the instructor said, she pointed at me and she said, she knows how to tell a story. I thought, yeah.
Yeah.
And because I taught Sunday school, I told stories every Sunday. I always told stories. But until you're given the opportunity to share, you don't.
No. And there's a lot of people that don't even believe that they have a story. Every single one of us have an experience in life. Every single one of us. We do not get out of this life without experience. And anything that's happened in your life can be an inspiration or a guiding light for someone.
Yes, definitely.
So for you to be able to share this story for either up and coming mediums or people that are wanting to connect with past lives, or just even communicate with spirit that are coming to them and recognize who it is that's coming to you, be able to maybe journal that down or see where it takes you, because it's going to lead you somewhere.
Right.
It's definitely going to lead you somewhere. So the book, Remember, it's called Remember a Love Story.
Yes.
Where can people get that from?
You can get it on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, both Canadian and US Amazon. You can get it from Friesen Press in Canada, because that's who I publish through. So it's on multiple platforms. Yeah, both a paperback and a Kindle version.
And I think you sent me the link, so after we upload this video, I can put the link up there, so should anybody want to go and get that book.
Right.
Now, the other thing that I want to share with you, or kind of ask you, when it comes to spirit has the ability to communicate with multiples of people all at the same time.
Yes.
So if somebody else says, wait a minute, Elvis talks to me, or JFK's come to me, or it doesn't mean anything. It just means that they're communicating with whoever resonates and can pick that frequency up.
Exactly. Yeah, you just have to be open to it, and there's no limit to who they can communicate with at once, right?
Yeah. So we're going to come to a close shortly, Eve. Do you have a final message for anybody?
Just try and focus on peace and love. That's my message, because this world is so chaotic and everything, and we tend to get sucked into the darkness. And if you can keep your spirit on peace and love, that's the answer.
That's the message right there, Eve. That's the message right there, which is the whole reason why I wanted to start doing these videos. Like I said, it wasn't just something I picked out of my head. This is a communication from my spirit guides, people that communicate with me. And it was like, come on, Karen, you've got to do this. You've got to do this.
Right.
Which is about bringing these stories, these experiences, these life experiences that we wouldn't ordinarily get to tell, or perhaps even afraid to tell in some instances.
Right.
But you end up being an inspiration for someone else. You end up being a guiding light for someone else. And when we share these stories, that gap of separation gets smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller, because we begin to see the similarities in our story, even though the experience may be very different. we get to see similarities. So Eve, I want to thank you. I want to thank you for your bravery.
I want to thank you for allowing me to share my story, because I've been hiding and not knowing where I could share it, because not everybody's open to, this is huge when you think about it. How could famous people show up in your meditation, right?
Because they're no different than you.
No, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Well, honestly, thank you for sharing your story. Thank you for being brave and breaking through your fear, and honoring us with your experience, because there's somebody out there that's going to listen to this story, and maybe they'll connect with you either via Rebels Compass, or again, I'll put your link up for your book, because I'm
Thank you so
forward
much.
to getting that myself and reading it. So this is wonderful. So anybody that, please share these videos. Like I've said many times before, you never know whose life you're going to touch by sharing them. The information that Eve has shared today, there may be a message for somebody because either they've been hearing Elvis, or because they've been hearing songs, or they get the inspiration through music to go in a particular direction. You never ever know what somebody is going to get out of these videos. So please share them. I'm asking from the depth of my heart and my soul to share them out as far and as wide as possible, because you never know who you're going to reach when you do. And Eve, I want to thank you again for being brave enough to share your story, and for honoring us with your presence here today. And for everybody else, I look forward to seeing you soon, and let's see who's going to be the next one that's going to share their story. Eve, you're my second person on.
Hey, thank you.
So I'm building this library. So for anybody else that listens to this story, if you have a story of your own that you believe can inspire someone else, can uplift someone else, that can bring some normality to what people consider weird, that really isn't, it's just another level of communication, then reach out to me, please. I will be honored to share your story. I look forward to seeing you all soon. Bye for now.
Bye.